How's it going, everyone? I'm Grant Cohn. My first roundtable back from vacation, so I'm a little frazzled. Sorry, I'm late. My fault. I'm joined by Waruna Perera, Maverick Pallack, Chuy Marquez, and the Niners actually made some moves today. They graciously didn't do anything when I was on vacation and waited until the first day back, so we'd have something to talk about. Thank you. They signed Fred Warner. We're going to talk about him. They also signed a new player named Simba Webster. His name is Simba Webster. He played for the Rams. He's a wide receiver. He's essentially a return specialist. Do you think he will make the 49ers final roster? Chuy, you go first.
You know, I honestly don't know at this point. It's kind of early on. We haven't really even had a chance to take a look at him. The signing kind of came out of nowhere, so I haven't really been able to look at a lot of film on him or anything. This is kind of concerning to me, though. I mean, we're still looking for a kick returner, punt returner at this point. Like, I thought we would have solved this a long time ago. This is something that I've been harping about all offseason is like, hey, why don't we have this settled? You know, I was thinking maybe we'd have the rookie running back, Elijah, return kicks maybe, and then you have to let Ayuk return punts at some point, I think. I mean, it baffles me that we're still looking for that position to be filled. Hopefully he's just a camp body and we have a plan in place, but it's just a little concerning to me. As far as him making the team, I don't know yet. I'd have to see him in preseason, see him in training camp. We'll see what happens.
I think Webster definitely has an uphill battle toward making the 49ers due to his lack of offensive experience. 305 special team snaps, only 8 offensive snaps in his 2-year NFL career, and 0 offensive stats. So he's more, like you said, Grant, more of a special teamer. He'll need to impress in punt and kick return duties this preseason and get some shots as a gunner as well on special teams to make this squad. But he's a little undersized. He kind of seems to me as Richie James insurance. He a similar body. He ran a similar 40 time, 4.55. So if Richie James, let's say if that doesn't work out, then Webster could be a practice squad potential guy. But I think Trent Sherfield has a better shot at making this team. And then, like you said, Chuy, Ayuk on punt return duties, Travis Benjamin, whatever. I think there's a couple more guys that have more experience in the system that have the advantage.
Actually, I looked through some highlights. He has some highlights from his college days as well. And he was a very high player when he was recruited from the high school. So in the Rams, I saw some of his punt returns. And he has a very good technique because usually last year, if you remember, we just collecting the punt and returning, we were bad at that. But he had a very good technique, collecting the ball, very safe hands. And he had nice angles because he was pretty, I don't think he's the fastest guy on the field, but he had some nice angles. Cutting through the players and running through the middle. So at a glance, it was like just a 4-minute video. Again, when it comes to highlight reel, you only show the best part of the player. But that part, it really impressed me because even his college highlights, he could get the separation because there were some throws that Jared Goff threw at him. He was able to, catch them at a decent height. Some were difficult throws, but he is still able to make them. So the point is that given the competition that we have already in the 49er wide receiver group and punt returners and stuff, whether he has a realistic chance. But from the clips I saw, he looks good. I think it will be up to him how much hard work he will ready to put in and make the team or not.
Yeah, I think I like what Mav said, calling him insurance. I think that's probably what he is. For Richie James, I think it would take a couple of injuries for him to make the team. I don't think he's probably, but he knows the system. He comes from a similar team. He gives you something. It's just that I'm looking at his stats. His longest punt return of his career is 16 yards, and the longest kick return of his career is 30 yards. So, I mean, he's solid. But I'd like to see Brandon Ayuk return the punts I really don't see the reason against it. If CeeDee Lamb can return punts for Dallas, Brandon Ayuk can return them for the 49ers. But so I don't think really this guy should make the team. Maybe he can make it on the practice squad. Do you guys know the rules with the practice squad? Is it like last year where unlimited amount of vets can make the practice squad, or is it back to before? I'm confused on that one. I'll do my job and I'll ask someone in the league. That's really on me.
One other thing with Webster, though, is we know Shanahan does not like fumbles from his punt returners. Dante Pettis got in the doghouse, a couple other guys. Simba Webster has 4 fumbles in 2 seasons. 3 he recovered, but still 4 is not the best. And that to me seems like your boy River Craycraft might have the edge.
Ooh, yeah. So Simba outside looking in. We'll see about him. The other move the Niners made today was Fred Warner's extension. 5 years, $95 million. He's the highest paid linebacker of all time. Kind of amazing to think 10 years ago, Patrick Willis signed 5 years, $50 million. Times have changed. What are your takeaways from this deal, Waruna?
Okay. The first thing is that congratulations to Fred Warner. I think he earned it the way he played. The second thing that initial thought came to my mind was that I hope that he will stay injury-free. I think that's the biggest concern because George Kittle got his extension. Next year, he missed 8 games. But so far, I think Fred Warner has played every game possible, the hardest possible way. So I believe that he can remain healthy. That's the second thing. The third thing was I was thinking, has the 49er mentality changed this front office? Because they did let DeForest Buckner go, right? They could have made that deal if they really wanted to. But this year, they signed every player that they thought crucial to this team. I mean, starting from Trent Williams, they played whatever the money that he wanted, Kyle Juszczyk, everything. So it seems like they want to spend whatever the money and keep the guys that have been performed well and the leaders on the team to stay with them. Other thing is why I'm really happy about Fred Warner getting this extension is, I mean, everyone was talking about it. We wanted to see it happening. He is the guy that speaks the truth in this team because most of the guys in this team, don't get me wrong over here, but they sometimes sugarcoat stuff. Because last year, when we were losing, George Kittle, Mostert, Debo, they would come out to the press conference. They would say, okay, we have to get better. This is not the way to get to the Super Bowl again. But not pointing to any specifics. Where is the wrong? Where is the fault? Is your quarterback not available? Is he getting injured? Is that the issue? But Fred Warner, probably week 13 or 14, after another embarrassing loss, he came out and said, we can't do this week in, week out. We have to fix it because we are repeating the same thing. It's not an excuse. So I think he is the voice in this team who is going to speak the truth. He wants the best out of everyone. He is not like a same mold of George Kittle, where take things lightly, okay, everything is okay. He is not going to pretend. He's not going to pretend. He is an old school guy who always wants 100% from entire team because he's like, I'm doing my best. Okay, you do the best as well. So that's why I think it is important for 49ers to get Fred Warner. Paying him that money, I think it's worth it.
This is one of the benefits of having Trey Lance as the quarterback of the future, at least for the next 3 years, is you can afford to sign your Fred Warners and possibly Nick Bosa next year's when they do move on from Jimmy Garoppolo, whether that's in a week, in 6 weeks, or next offseason. They'll have a lot of cap room where they can take care of some of their other guys because they have a controllable quarterback like Lance. And so I think it's definitely a good sign that they were able to get Warner done now before training camp really gets going. Obviously, there's always going to be injury concerns, especially with this team. But Fred Warner, I think, is now the leader that I think, Grant, you were searching for last year. I think it's Jimmy Ward and Fred Warner, it's safe to say, are those two guys. And they have those two guys under contract now. And there's no questions about it now.
It's the two coverage guys in the middle of the field.
Yeah, they both can take on tight ends. They both can take on wide receivers. They both can take on running backs. Gives D'Amico Ryans' defense so much versatility.
Yeah.
So I took away a couple things from this. I think first things first is the 49ers finally did something right this offseason. This was expected that it was going to happen for a while. Everybody knew that this deal was going to get done. But I'm just glad that the 49ers finally, did the right thing. They made him the highest paid linebacker in the NFL, which he deserves. And I think, going forward, they locked down that position and they locked down the quarterback of the defense. He's obviously makes the play calls. He's the leader of the defense. Even though Nick Bosa may be comparable in talent, may play a more premium position and be probably more valuable overall, I think Fred Warner is the unquestioned leader of the defense, and I think it was a good move by the 49ers. The second thing that I kind of took away from it was the contract breakdown. I was a little surprised. I thought they were going to front load his deal. It looks like it's more backloaded. He has like a $3.6 million cap hit this year and then $8.1 million next year. So that's kind of weird to me. I thought, hey, we're maybe going to get rid of Jimmy Garoppolo. Let's front load his deal. Let's get him paid right away, get that over with. So it's a little bit weird to me. I think maybe that tells about, they're planning to have some expensive players on the roster this season. So that's why they left that cap number low. It might spell trouble for the people who are thinking, a certain quarterback won't be around come the beginning of the season. I think the 49ers might have planned it to keep our two top quarterbacks on the roster this offseason with the way they structured his contract.
Yeah, it's interesting. I saw a respected writer that I know very well, Josh Hermsmeyer, writes for 538. His look at football is analytic, mathematical, and he's very smart. And he often says things to rile people up, and he's often basically right. And he was saying that the Fred Warner contract is awful, and he didn't really explain why. I'm thinking he would say because you don't want to invest highly in non-premium positions, and middle linebacker is a non-premium position, unlike corner, defensive end, offensive tackle, quarterback, wide receiver. I guess he's essentially right, but I would say that middle linebacker can be a premium position if the middle linebacker is as good in coverage as Fred Warner is. Because if you're a middle linebacker and most of your value is from stopping the run, then Josh Hermsmeyer has a really good point, because who cares about the running game, really? That's not going to win you a championship, or really, it won't. But if you have a linebacker who's as good in coverage as Warner is, is he not as valuable as any cornerback? A lot of the best receivers are tight ends and running backs right now anyway. This guy can cover those players, just like how George Kittle, he's not a wide receiver. Okay, how many wide receivers would you rather have over a healthy George Kittle? Seems to me that Warner and Kittle aren't necessarily playing premium positions, but they're definitely premium players who make others better. So I think it's a good signing for sure.
Well, and definitely just looking at the defenses that are known as the best defenses in the NFL, outside of the Rams, who have Donald and Ramsey, you think of the Bucks, and they have Levante David, who I know Vish loves Levante David, and that's one of those off-ball linebackers that you love, or that people love, and he has his money. And then Darius Leonard's about to get his money. In this NFL, if you have a linebacker that can cover guys, especially those matchup problem tight ends, it's a really big weapon for your defense and allows you to play so much more zone defense if you need to. That kind of eliminates those pesky slot receivers.
Yeah, so it seems to be that Fred Warner's getting paid around what an elite cornerback would make. Seems fair. He's not getting paid pass rusher money, but that's okay.
Another thing to add to that, Grant, is this fits in right with our identity, honestly. When you go back and you look at Patrick Willis, he was that star middle linebacker that anchored our defense. He passed the torch over to Navarro Bowman. During Jim Harbaugh's 3 seasons where the NFC Championship, we had that strong middle linebacker play that kind of set up the whole defense and anchored our defense. I think that's been our identity, and I think it's nice to see that they're kind of returning back to that. They're locking down that position, and we're going to have that all-star linebacker there in the middle for a while.
Okay, who do you think is the next extension candidate? Who's going to be the next guy in line after Fred Warner to get a major payday? Last year it was George Kittle. This year it's Fred Warner. Who's next? Chuy.
I really passed to me on this one. I'll come back on this one.
Fair. Maverick.
I think there's two candidates that, not to the massive scale of George Kittle and Fred Warner, but I think Dre Greenlaw could be next offseason, could be a guy if they choose to pay two linebackers. I don't know if that's in their philosophy of paying two linebackers, but Dre Greenlaw, and then possibly, and he's a free agent in 2023, so next year would be his last year under contract. And then Laken Tomlinson, I know he's not the flashiest left guard in the NFL, but he's shown he can be healthy. They can lock down the left side of the offensive line for the foreseeable future at a reasonable price. I don't think Laken Tomlinson would break the bank by any means. So those are my two picks to be the next guys that get an extension.
My idea is on Nick Bosa. So I think he might be the next big thing. But what worries me is the same thing that we always talked about, injuries. We can give him the contract, but will he worth it? Can he stay healthy? So in a way, it scares me because we now have very big contracts. I remember somebody was discussing today that right now we have in our top positions, we are paying very top dollar. I mean, Kittle, now Fred Warner, Trent Williams. So can we afford to do that? So probably if we cut Jimmy, maybe for another 2-3 years until Trey Lance's extension comes up, we can do that. But again, we might have to be really careful when Bosa's extension comes up.
Yeah,
Chuy,
that
you ready?
was. Yeah, I'm ready now. So, Waruna brings up a good point. That was a hard question for me because we're already paying everybody. We're paying Kittle, we're paying Trent Williams, now we're paying Warner. I think maybe next offseason, depending on how they play this year, Jason Verrett is a candidate who I think will be an extension candidate. If he's able to stay healthy again and he plays anywhere close to the level that he did last year, assuming we don't have Jimmy Garoppolo on the books anymore, I think he's going to be somebody that we're probably going to lock up to a nice 3 or 4 year extension. And then maybe Raheem Mostert. If Raheem Mostert comes out, balls out, I think we may be able to extend him. And that way we'll have the 1-2 punch with him and Sermon for the next couple of years. So I think those are two candidates that we could see maybe next offseason.
Okay. It seems to me it could be Bosa, although the Niners can always fudge it by giving him the 5th-year option. Say he gets hurt again and there's a question there. They can wait, like they just did with McGlinchey. I don't know if McGlinchey, he might be in a year or two. I'm thinking Deebo Samuel because Deebo was a 2nd-round pick that can't give him a 5th-year option. They could always franchise tag him, but it seems to me that after this year, they could already start talking extension. If he has a really good year now, he missed time, he might not get it, but if Fred Warner got it after 3 years, Deebo could get it after 3 years too. I don't know if he will. What do you guys think about locking up Deebo? If he has one good year, you could say maybe you get him at a discount because 2nd year was no good.
I think you'd have to try to lock him up because giving a franchise to someone like Deebo Samuel where his health is in question is always risky, having to pay him that much money for 1 year if he misses 17 games. If they could get him pretty cheap coming off of a middle year this year, that'd be a steal in my opinion. But I know maybe you don't want to commit to a guy with that much injury concern.
I have a question. Okay, go ahead, Grant. Then I can ask my question.
Okay, Twisted Eva says, shout out to Jackhammer. Hey, Grant, check out, if you haven't yet, on Jack's channel yesterday, his Niner Chatter video. Time to watch at 158 to 227. LOL, enjoying the content. Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you for the donation. I will definitely check that out. All right, Reno, what are you going to say?
So I had to ask the question from Chuy based on what he said on Ryan Mostert. Do you think he will worth that whatever the top dollar big money contract? Because the reason is, given his injury history, he can't go for a season 1,000 yards, 1,200 yards. You can't expect him to carry a big workload. So you have to use him as a guy who comes in very, special situations, give you that big yardage, but maximum 10-12 carries per game. So if that is the case, is it worth to pay him that top dollar for a running back, or should we just move on? I mean, this might be controversial, but should we move from him and bring someone else?
Well,
Yeah,
I think
that's a great
they're set
question.
up to move on. They drafted 2 running backs this year, but it would always come down to his price.
Right. And I think it really depends on his performance this year. That's a big unknown with a lot of 49ers is the injury history is can he stay healthy? What if he comes in this year he's healthy all 16, 17 games and he rushes for 1,200, 1,300 yards as the lead back? You know, you have to pay that guy. You have to keep him around. And then you still have the backup insurance with Trey Sermon, and it's a good 1-2 punch, especially with the speed that he has. I mean, he's like the second fastest player in the NFL at this point. So you have to have that kind of game-breaking ability. You can't just let it walk out the door if he stays healthy.
All right, so Fred Warner signed today. Trey Sermon signed today. Simba Webster signed today. Trey Lance hasn't signed yet. Ambry Thomas hasn't signed yet. But forget Ambry Thomas. When do you think Trey Lance will sign his contract? When is that going down, in your opinion? And what's the holdup, if you have any theory? Waruna.
Yeah, actually, I went through that NFL operations document. According to that, it seems like August 10th is the deadline, basically, because otherwise, if you don't sign your rookies, then they have to be with your team. Then you can draft, trade them in 2022, so on and so forth. I think maybe they are trying to negotiate this contract because as we all know, there is a controversy going on. Somebody is pulling for Jimmy, in the organization, and we want Trey Lance to start. So, just speculating that sometimes their agent might be asking both the questions. Okay, you drafted him with that much of draft capital, then pay him what he is due, right? So maybe 49ers are saying, okay, we are not going to start him. We are going to sit him. Once he starts, we can renegotiate the contract. We will guarantee that when the right time comes, we can give him the top-notch quarterback contract. But for the moment, let's go with whatever the basic deals that comes with NFL rules. So that might be the delay holding up because they have these situations. That's just speculation again.
I think he signs the first day of training camp. That's no inside information. That's just my guess. Is Zach Wilson still isn't signed? So being the third pick, it's not as much pressure because your contract's pretty much modeled after the second overall pick usually. And I know there's a set number for the most part. So it's not like he's holding out for $15 extra million on the back end. It's not like 2006 Alex Smith situation anymore. So I think training camp starts, Trey Lance will be there signed. I don't think it's that much of an issue.
Why do you think it comes down to the deadline?
Because
they're waiting on Zach Wilson. Deadline? They're waiting on Zach Wilson, basically.
Well, I think that is one thing, waiting on Zach Wilson, but also it could be something as small as Trey Lance's salary cap hit could have maneuvered salary cap situations where the Fred Warner extension could be different, or maybe they still have, who knows, Jimmy Garoppolo trade talks. It could be any number of things. But I think waiting till around Zach Wilson signs isn't the worst thing in the world. There's still 2 other guys besides the 2 quarterbacks that haven't signed yet, Greg Newsome and Rashawn Slater. So it's not the worst thing in the world that Lance is unsigned. And I don't think it'll be him holding out of Michael Crabtree's situation. So I think he'll be there for training camp.
Yeah, I agree with Mav. I think it's going to be the very morning, the first day of training camp, or it's going to be the night before training camp opens. And I think there is a couple things actually that are holding up the contract. When you look at Trevor Lawrence's contract, he only had like $26 million guaranteed of the contract. And that's odd to me, being the number 1 overall pick. I figured he would have had almost all of his contract guaranteed. And Trey Lance is also working under the assumption he may not start right away. And that's a little concerning as an agent of a player, who they gave up all this capital for, drafted 3rd overall. If he's not going to play right away, that's going to limit maybe his value to renegotiate his next deal down the road, possibly. So I think Trey Lance is going to hold out for as much money as he can get. I don't think he'll miss any time. He just seems too competitive in wanting to be out on the field. So I think eventually he's just going to tell his agent, hey, once you think we got the best offer, let's sign the contract. I'm not missing any time. I can see Trey Lance saying that. But I do think that they are going to hold out for as much guaranteed money as possible because of all of the draft capital that the 49ers spent to get him, as well as the fact that he may not play right away. Not to mention those California state taxes. So I think he wants as much guaranteed money up front as possible, and they're going to push it right up to the start of training camp.
Yeah, those are interesting theories as to why he's taking it up to the deadline. It seems that until Zach Wilson signs, maybe if I were Trey Lance's agent, I would say let's just wait for Zach Wilson signs. We can use those parameters, as leverage. Whatever, that makes sense. Yeah, it seems to me that it's going to be the first day of camp, so that would be 27. I'm looking up first day of camp, July 25. 2 years ago was when Nick Bosa signed and when Deebo Samuel signed. So they've done this before. It's deadline business. Why not? First day of camp, no harm, no foul. I think that's when we expect it. If it takes any longer than July 27th, start to worry. But until then, expect it to happen in 6 days.
And Grant, does that, just like being a journalist at the first day of camp, does that do you think that could be a strategy of the kind of draws away from the overall overarching theme of the first day of camp and asking questions is having the rookies sign that day? Do you think that could just be a PR strategy of just have something that the writers would focus on as the first round pick signs?
Well, you have more experience with PR than I do, so I think that's genius, and I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, maybe they want to control the narrative of the first day of camp, and they want to save that for day one. Why not? Who knows? They could have agreed on everything already and been like, let's just wait to announce it.
Well, because
I think there should be
sign Trey Lance. It's a great day, no matter what camp looks like that day.
Right. It's a great day. So why don't you do that on the 27th when there are people there to talk about it as opposed to today? It makes sense. So they did with Nick Bosa.
Makes great sense there, Mav.
Yeah, good call. See, Mav has insider knowledge. I like that. That was good. All right. I came across an article just before the show started on NBC Sports Edge by Patrick Doherty ranking the NFL general managers. And I thought that's a great topic. What a wonderful topic. Where is John Lynch ranked? First of all, where do you think he's ranked? Where do you think?
You told us, but
no. Never mind.
I would say top 10.
Okay, so he's ranked 11th. I thought that was very interesting. I'm going to say what he wrote, Mr. Doherty. And then I'm going to ask you if you think this is the right ranking, too high or too low. Here's what he wrote. As is the case with most hotshot coaches, it can be hard to tell where Kyle Shanahan ends and his general manager begins. Handpicked by Shanahan, we know it's not John Lynch making the final call on matters of receiving and quarterbacking. It might not even be Lynch on defense, where he was a Hall of Fame player. It is Lynch's job to accommodate his coach. He has done so as the duo has slapped together a championship caliber defensive core. It is on Shanahan's side of the ball where the front office has floundered, putting too many eggs in the Jimmy Garoppolo basket while failing to find enduring solutions in the backfield or receiving core. Injuries have played a part, especially at wideout. Deebo Samuel could still end up forming one of the league's best 1-2 punches with Brandon Ayuk as George Kittle dominates the seam. The Garoppolo matter has also been settled with Shanny's biggest bet, Trey Lance. Lance's lone appearance since the end of the 2019 season was an October 2020 exhibition against Central Arkansas, whereas Garoppolo was a safe bet that failed Lance's swing for the fences. A front office partnership that has thus far gotten by on alibis and one 13-3 campaign is officially on the spot. If Lance fails, Shanahan and his personal chef, general manager, may no longer be allowed to pick the ingredients. What do you think? Too high, too low, buy or sell the ranking of 11 for John Lynch? And I can give you more information if you want it, like who's above him, who's below him. Let me know what you need.
Well, just checking the list, I found out on Google, and just John Schneider being ahead of John Lynch is an interesting one, just based on how the Seahawks
Real
have
quick,
drafted.
I'll do the top 10. Bill Belichick 1, Kevin Colbert, Pittsburgh Steelers 2, Andy Reid, Brett Veach, Kansas City Chiefs 3, Mickey Loomis, Sean Payton, New Orleans Saints 4, Brandon Beane, Buffalo Bills 5, Chris Ballard, Indianapolis Colts 6, Rick Spielman, Minnesota Vikings 7, Les Snead, Rams 8, John Schneider, Seahawks 9.
It's an interesting list. Basically once you get outside the top 7, it's pretty much a push, I think. But Lynch being ahead of Tampa Bay's Jason Licht, I thought was an interesting one, just based on how Tampa Bay built their whole roster.
Yeah, he's 12.
Yeah,
Lynch is 11. The guy who just won the Super Bowl is 12. That was my first head scratcher. I would have to put Licht ahead of Lynch. I mean, Licht had some bad years, but the problem with Tampa in retrospect was Jameis Winston. They had a good team, had a lot of good players. And you took out Jameis Winston and put in a 43-year-old Tom Brady, really good team. And it wasn't just Brady. It was Antoine Winfield, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, Jason Pierre-Paul, Shaq Barrett. I mean, Devin, it's a really good team. So, but you were saying the Seahawks are kind of a crappy team that has that they basically had 2 good draft picks 10 years ago that's popping this team up, Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson.
I think the Seahawks had a little bit more than that. I mean, they had Richard Sherman, they had Cam Chancellor.
I'm just saying now, in terms of like what they have now.
I think they're in salary cap trouble now,
Yes.
and that you know is on the GM. So I think that really should knock him down a little bit. Same thing with the Rams. I mean, their depth is just non-existent because they went out and made all these flashy signings. They have zero depth. They're just paying way too many people, way too much money. A very top-heavy team, so I think that he can maybe be bumped down a little bit, the Rams GM. But I think, you can't really argue for John Lynch to be a lot higher, I think, than what he's at. I think it's a fair ranking. We've only had 1 winning season in his tenure, so you have to own that. I always say that about Kyle Shanahan. He has to own that. He only has 1 winning season in his tenure. So a lot of people give, Kyle Shanahan a pass. They don't give John Lynch the same pass. So I think, it's a fair ranking for him and for Kyle Shanahan, honestly.
10 is John Robinson, by the way, in Tennessee, who has done a good job recently. Another one that I would say is a good one. He's only had 1 year, but Andrew Berry in Cleveland, I think is pretty good. But he's young, and he's only done it for 1 year. I thought John Lynch would be lower, but I don't know. What do you think, Waruna? Is it fair?
I will put him in the top 10.
You would?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So my reasons are this. Now, when John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan took over, this organization was at rock bottom, right? I mean, they were going nowhere. Even Jed Doak, I don't think he had any idea what to do next. So their record doesn't speak for it, yes. But right now, we all know that they have created a culture, a very sustainable, healthy environment. That's why all these players, Fred Warner, even without a contract, he came out to training camps, right? Just voluntarily. So all these players, they believe in this team, right? All the NFL, the media, everyone is excited about 49ers. We can say whether 49ers are overrated or not during this season, but everyone has very high hopes about 49ers given they are in the injuries. If not, they all know this is a team with a potential. This is a squad which has very star level players and even other players who can lift up their game from being average players to the next level. So all this hard work, the credit should go to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. So that's why I think even though they don't still have a winning record over 500, it's a remarkable job given the situation that we were in. But they have done some costly mistakes as well. 2017 draft, that's a very costly miss. But still, I think he should be in top 10.
I think it's tough to rank a guy with 1 winning season top 10, but they do it with Kyle Shanahan too, so I guess it's consistent. It's interesting they put Steve Keim with the Cardinals at 21. I think that roster is good, but he did hire Cliff Kingsbury, so that's on him. I do think it made me laugh.
Chargers with
Telesco.
Yeah, taking Herbert. I know
they have him at 15.
Yeah, picking Herbert and then protecting him with Rashawn Slater this year. I think the Chargers have had a good couple drafts that could change after this year.
They rank Lynch ahead of Eric DeCosta from the Ravens. That's serious. Can you guess who's 31 out of 32?
Well, is it like a guy that's a new GM?
So Houston Texans.
New-ish. He's been around the block. Got a new
Trent
spot.
Baalke?
Yeah. Trent Baalke's 31. George Patton with the Broncos is 32. I don't know what George Patton has done, but Trent Baalke 31 sounds pretty good to me. Anyway,
there's
11.
two things, Grant, really quick on John Lynch. So I think there's two things he has working against him that really need to be taken into account. One is the injuries on this roster. Like, everybody wants to talk about that being an excuse of why we underperform. We consistently have built rosters with injured players.
Yes.
Injury-prone players, we consistently build the roster. That's whoever's making the personnel decisions' fault. You can say that's either John Lynch, that's Kyle Shanahan. That's their fault. They keep getting these players. They keep banking on these players. These players keep getting injured. That you have to take accountability for that at some point when it's happened so many times. So that's one strike that I think can lower John Lynch down the list. And the second thing is, I think he kind of gives in too much to Kyle Shanahan. At some point, I think he needs to stand up. We thought we had seen it this offseason when he stood up finally and he said no to Mac Jones on the quarterback situation. We kind of think that may have been a different conversation that went on with Kyle Shanahan. But I think he's kind of just rolled over and let Kyle Shanahan do whatever he wants. And you have to have that separation of power. You have to have those two competing viewpoints in the room to really drive, excellence and competition. You can't just give in to Kyle Shanahan all the time. So I think that's another knock that maybe he needs to step up his leadership a little bit and just say, hey, look, this is my job. This is what I'm here to do. Kyle, I'm going to have to overrule you, every now and then.
Okay, let's switch gears. This is a topic on our minds because of Richard Sherman. It was very upsetting what happened. He's clearly going through a lot. He put his life in risk. He put others' lives in risk. It was a very dark story what happened with him last week. And we have no idea why he did what he did. He came out on Instagram and apologized and said he's been going through some stuff and that mental health is real. We know that CTE is an issue that lots of football players will have to deal with in their lives. We have no idea if Richard Sherman has it, and there's no way to know. There's no way to test for that until after someone is passed away. So we can't speculate. We won't speculate, but it's on our minds, the CTE topic, because of that. And so for that reason, I'm asking you, do you guys feel the NFL does enough to protect players' heads? They say they try to. What do you think, Waruna?
Yeah, I don't think the simple answer is no, because by watching a lot of rugby, the main motto is players first. In rugby, you don't wear helmets, but when it comes to player protection, they are doing a remarkable job. Now, if you remember last year, the playoff game was in Chiefs versus Browns. The Daniel Sorensen, the hit on Rashad Higgins. That the major point that came out of this hit was that the touchback rule, whether it's fair or not, but it should have been, why didn't we eject the player? Why don't we make rules to catch these things? Because if it happened in rugby, what would happen is initially the defender would get a red card. He would be sent off. That means the team cannot replace him for the entire game. They would have to play with lesser number of players. Then that would probably go into the tournament committee. He would get multiple game suspension. Those are the things that rugby is doing to protect their players. In NFL, there is one other thing. Usually, defender is not given the responsibility to protect the ball carrier. That's a very foreign concept to football. But in rugby, always defender has the utmost responsibility to protect the oncoming ball carrier, because if the ball carrier goes low and if you tackle him above his shoulder line, it's an immediate yellow card. So you don't tolerate it anymore. And if the player goes up in the air to catch the ball, and if you tackle him while the player is on the air, immediate red card. The other thing is, I think most people now would get pissed off. You can't do that with football. It's controlled violence. It's the way it has been. It would kill the game if you introduce more and more regulations. You would miss these nasty hits and everything. But we have to remember, if we don't protect these players at NFL level, you get paid. At least you can. Richard Sherman has some money, so he can recover. At least he can get some help. But what about the players who are playing at junior levels, college levels, who are, going through the cracks? Who is going to take care of their mental issues? Are we going to talk about that? I mean, yes, we enjoy the game. It's fun for us. But end of the day, the families, the closest to that person is going to. And the other thing is, if you look at the stats, you can search and find out there are numerous studies that number of high schools and amount of kids playing football, it's decreasing year by year. It's in a not in a very rapid decline, but like 1%, 5%, there is a decline. So because the media and everybody when talks about CTE, parents, they get scared. They don't want their kid to play football. So we have to make sure that we protect the players now and make sure this game is safe for the future generations. So otherwise, down the line, we might see that parents will decide, okay, I can't let my kid play football if this is the thing. Because if you remember, what's the name? Tyler Hilinski, he committed suicide. He was 21 years old. He had bad CT. Very bad CT. He was the starting quarterback. So these are the things that we should take this much more seriously and act now. As fans, as a journalist, you have a responsibility. If we do not do that now, it will be a bigger disaster when we have more stats, more numbers coming out.
It's been an issue for a long time. My freshman year of college was actually that this was what my persuasive essay was on CTE in the NFL and how there's a lot of problems with it. And I remember the study just then the amount of players they found it in their brain was staggering. And it's just, I'm sure if there was a economical way the NFL could fix it, they would do it. But I think as we've known that there's a lot of other things the NFL cares about a lot more. And so that's all I'll leave it out. I wish there was a way to keep players safe because it's head injuries or like what Jimmy Ward was talking about with you. What was that 2 weeks ago, Grant, where he was like, you either have to hit the head or you make it where the guy can't walk again in 20 years, essentially, because you have to start taking out their knees. And then that's why there's been so many more ACL injuries. So it's just it's a really tough sport. And I know this is like being a classic dumb millennial changing America's game, but one of the best ways to fix it would just be eliminate the kickoff. And I think a lot of people would be fine with it, wouldn't miss it after 5 years. And that I think would save a lot of concussions, a lot of injuries, but there's no real fix.
Yeah, I think the NFL has actually been doing a better job of watching out for player safety, current player safety. There's a lot of practice restrictions that they've collectively bargained with the Players Association. So I think it's the Players Union. So I think, they're doing a better job. Where I think they're falling short is really helping former players once they leave the league to make sure that they're getting the care that they need. They're getting the resources that they need to stay healthy after they leave the game. But I think a lot of the changes that they've done, this offseason alone, I've never seen 3 teams get fined for off-season practice, violations. So we were one of them. And I think that's a significant step that they're taking as well. The fines, honestly, they didn't really do much to the teams or the coaches, but at least it's action that they're taking. So I'd like to say that they're trying and they're doing a better job than they had in the past. Their focus, I think, though, should be on former players and helping them once they do leave the game because I think that that's where most of them have trouble once they're retired or out of the league.
RIP tight end Greg Clark, indications of CTE. Yeah, I mean, it seems like they're trying to do things like they've reduced practice time. There's less contact in practice. But it's interesting, Waruna bringing up the comparison to rugby. I think that's a fascinating comparison. It's such a similar game, and the main obvious difference between the two is the helmet thing. It would be interesting to see what football would be like without helmets. Would it have the same ratings? I don't know. You actually be able to see players' faces. That might be good for the league. It'd be really interesting. I mean, wonder what if in 20 years the NFL is a sport with no helmets? Could you do it?
I've seen some interviews in the past, Grant, when it comes to rugby players. They actually hold up themselves better. They try to avoid contact better themselves. I think players are more reckless because they have a helmet and they have that false sense of security with the helmet on. So I think that's a big difference between the game. Is rugby doesn't have as big a collisions, I think, as football does, because players are aware.
That might be the solution. I don't know if Americans would tolerate it though. Maybe they would just lose interest in football at that point. Without helmets, I mean, I don't know. I can't watch this anymore. I don't know.
I can give a quick answer to that. We can keep the helmets, but what in rugby, what happens is, as Chuy said, we focus more on the technique of the tackle. For example, you don't do a shoulder charges. Shoulder charges are illegal in rugby. It's a yellow card. But the player technique, body positions, that sometimes I have felt like watching NFL, the player would give a shoulder charge and the ball carrier just shrug it and he goes to another 5-10 yards. But if a rugby player does that, he would come with a proper wrap around the arms tackle. He would stop that player on the spot. So technically, I mean, I'm not trying to compare the games, which one is the better or not, but technically the focus is to play it safe, but at the same time, make the same impact, stop the ball carrier. So I think that's where we can take it from. I mean, keep the helmet, but make sure that you can take the technical aspect from rugby and improve the safety aspect.
Okay, final topic. This is another topic that Waruna would like to write about, so I'm going to give him first dibs on discussing this. Is it okay to complain about officiating? And the context here is the Niners have done it's been something they've liked to do when they lose the Super Bowl, and maybe it's something you do when you lose a heartbreaker, but they still say Nick Bosa got held. I think Jim Harbaugh would still probably say that Michael Crabtree got held. A lot of times these refs determine the outcomes of very important games. Is it fair to point to them as the deciding factor or as an excuse or whatever you want to say, Waruna?
Yeah, I think it's very unfair. The reason is this, because no matter how the way you write the rule book, when it comes to interpretation, it differs from person to person. For example, I have played field hockey for many years. I try to referee some games during the practice, and it's super hard. The only thing that we have to do is always make sure that teams and coaches get into a common forum and discuss about the officiating games has the same level of standards. I think that's where the problem comes in. If you play a penalty, I mean, if you call a penalty on George Kittle for offensive pass interference, it should be the same for Travis Kelce as well. If you officiate that two situations in two different ways, then it's a problem. Then it's okay to complain. But most of the time, even if we go to Super Bowl, we can find many plays the players and coaches could have done better. So unless we find, I don't know whether artificial intelligence or cloning the humans, that the best referee is on every day, every game, we cannot solve this problem. So we have to understand, because more we complain, it discourages these referees. Then especially, these players complain, the referees drop the game. How many of these players take officiating as a career after they finish with football? I would argue,
Zero.
I would challenge them. Go do that. You will find. Just go to a junior level game, try doing that. You can't do it. these people are doing a thankless job. So stop being complaining, move on with your life, and contact the proper channels, give the proper feedback.
I think it's okay because I do it all the time.
Is that it, Matt?
Yeah, that's all I have. Yeah.
So I think, I think the way that they really need to attack the officiating is there just needs to be a more consistent and transparent, I think, evaluation of officials by the league. I don't know how many times last year and the season before the NFL comes in 2 days after the result of a game, a questionable penalty, and they're saying, "Oh, we got that wrong. We apologize." But then, nothing comes of it. You don't know if the officials were fined. You don't know what happened. I know they're graded, and they put the top graded official crew in the playoffs and in the Super Bowl, but there should be fines. There should be something going on that's actually reported. That way, the officials are just able to be held more accountable. I think once the officials are held more accountable, then they'll improve themselves and they'll be better officiating across the board and a less reason to complain. Because I hate complaining about the officials, but I think once they're held accountable, the players will be satisfied with that, and then everybody can move on.
The Niners' biggest complaint is the lack of consistency. I've heard them say, they called the offensive pass interference on George Kittle in the Super Bowl, but not on Kyle Rudolph in previous couple of games before then. Tight ends, the Vikings tight end. It's a good point. And they also said, Kyle Shanahan said, they never called anything on Nick Bosa, but they called his offensive lineman for a bunch of holding penalties that knocked them out of field goal range when he was with the Falcons. That's a good point. But again, as Chuy was saying, these are different officiating crews and they're humans and they're trying their best. It's the same thing in basketball. It's the same thing in baseball. It's the same thing in any sport with human officiating. And I always have liked the idea of human officiating because it's like the weather. It's like the surface. It's another variable that you got to do advanced scouting on. What is this guy's strike zone? What is this guy? Do they let you play? Are they ticky-tack? I love that kind of stuff about sports. Is it a fast surface? Is it a slick surface? I think it's just another variable that you got to account for, and I like that. And when people say, I hate the human element, you got to take it out. I don't know. I just think it's just another layer of texture that's fun to think about. So, yeah, you want them to be consistent. You want them to get as close to the letter of the law as possible, and I think they're graded on that stuff, and the best ones get to do the Super Bowl. But you can't expect every crew to officiate the same, and part of winning a game is getting a feel for that officiating crew that day, just like it is getting a feel for the weather that day or the wind. You know what I mean? All those things, they go into it. So I like it.
Yeah, tell that to Chris Paul with Scott Foster last night. I saw he's 2-17, 0-17, something like that. Now 0-18.
Scott Foster's fault. Sorry, Chris.
So
yeah,
I think the problem with that, Grant, and what you said was we need to make sure that the officials don't make it about themselves. Because whenever baseball is the worst with it, when you have an umpire who likes to make a show calling strikeouts and stuff like that, they like to be involved and make it more of a show. And that's where I talk about having to.
Yeah, you don't want people being like, these are my rules. No, these are the rules. It's just I'm doing my best to interpret them. Right. Sorry about that. Yeah. Jacob says, LJ didn't make Super Bowl with good team. Kyler Murray didn't make it with good team. Tua didn't make playoffs. What's different with Lance? We made it with Jimmy Garoppolo. Okay. And the Rams made it with Jared Goff, and he's gone. So maybe, I don't know. The Jets went to the playoffs a bunch of times with Mark Sanchez. You had to move on. Sometimes you got to move on. The question, I guess, it comes down to with Jimmy Garoppolo is, does he make other players better? The answer is no. Getting paid too much money. That's why he's got to go.
That's why they re-signed Fred Warner.
That's why they re-signed Fred Warner. He makes other players better. All right. That's our show. Thank you, everyone, for participating. Thank you guys for watching. It's been nice to see you guys. I missed you guys the last few days. So it's a pleasure. And hope you guys have a great night. And I'll see you guys tomorrow That was a great ending to the show. Everyone have a terrific time. I'm ending the show now.